So, as a photographer, you're trying to take a picture of something that you've seen. Let's use the moon as an example again. And you can't get the perception that you've seen because there's an optical illusion there. And whether you magnify that with your camera or not might actually add to that misconception or that misunderstanding or that misalignment of it. It may add or subtract from it depending on what lens you're using, where you stood, that kind of stuff. So photography, I think, is kind of a bit battered by optical illusions because we want to represent what we've seen. We want to show what we've seen. We want to give it a good attempt to photograph and represent what we actually saw and felt. And it's difficult when you're faced with optical illusions, which are, for all intents and purposes, none of our making, and we can't do anything about them. We just have to accept them. And there are very few things, aren't there, in life, particularly with, you know, all the gurus there nowadays, that we don't have a definitive answer for why the moon looks massive in the sky, but then it doesn't. Or when the sun looks massive in the sky, or then it doesn't. Or then you point a zoom lens or you point a telescopic lens at the moon or the sun, and it still doesn't look as big as what it looks. Even through magnification, it's still not quite what you expected it to be. And I've done quite a lot of moon gazing, a lot of sun gazing, a lot of star gazing, and just looking at my pictures that I just dragged a few across to talk about optical illusions. I mean, this one here of the sun setting, for example. The sun looks tiny, and it looks 95 million miles away. But on another day, on another space, that sun would look massive on the horizon and look like it's about 30 miles away. And I don't disagree necessarily with some of the conclusions that are made by experts, but I think it's just a simpler answer that it's because we live in a simulation, and the simulation doesn't allow for certain things because of its limits. Speed of light being another one. Speed of light is not a constant in the universe. It's not the fastest thing in the universe. It's just the fastest thing in our reality. It's the fastest we can travel in our constraints in the Minecraft that we live in. That's the limit. And if you get out and go past that, who knows? Another picture of the moon. Now this moon's high up in the sky, and it's photographed against some branches in the foreground. But again, it looks quite small in the sky. But earlier that evening, I didn't have my camera with me, that moon was massive on the horizon as I was coming up the hill towards coming on. And it's the same moon, it's the same size. But optically, why, just because it's got stuff near it, did it look bigger? I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's got stuff near it here, but it doesn't look bigger. But when I was coming up the hill towards home and saw it initially, it looked like it should have filled the frame. But it wouldn't have done. I know it would. If I got my camera out and pointed at it, it would have looked pretty normal because of the illusion. And I have loads of sunset pictures, loads of moon pictures, because I'm a bit of a freak like that. I like to photograph the stuff. But then, you know, you've got like this is the sun with a filter. It's heavily cropped. When you see this is like a 900mm lens. It was an old film lens with a converter onto either the 7D or the 5D. So it wasn't that sharp, but stuck an ND filter on it and allowed me to get some daytime pictures of the sun just over the top of the house across, so the kind of blur you can see at the bottom, that kind of looks a bit like shutter curtain, but it's not. That's just the roof of the house across the way. But the actual picture, the original picture, is kind of like, you know, that's probably about 15-20% of the actual picture, so it's still quite small even with that amount of zoom. But again, on another day, in another space, with another slight deviation of perception, that would have filled the frame visually, but not when you point a camera at it. And I know there'll be some of you out there who've got it sewn up in your mind as to how this works, why it works, and you might be right, I might be wrong, but it just makes more sense to me for it to be the limitations of how our self processes information and how the information in the reality we live in is processed and fed back to us. That makes more sense to me, particularly when you get down to quantum level, than trying to come up with human, man-made reasons for it. I mean, if you just look at the double slit experiment and how not only do particles know when we're watching them, they can go back in time to remedy themselves because we're watching them. I mean, that in itself is just fucking mind-blowing. And if you don't know what I mean by that, just go and research double slit experiment and watch some of that stuff. And it proves to me, I think, that the ether, the thing we live in, the reality we live in, is actually alive, not just a bunch of stuff. It's actually everything's kind of connected. And it makes more sense for me for that to be the case, having seen optical illusions everywhere, for them to be explained by limitation. There's a few pictures here I've got over the years of the sun and the moon behind the clouds, and you see some illusions like that, how it looks like the sun's in front of the cable, and it's just not. It's another optical illusion. And you see this all the time. You see pictures on YouTube and all over the place of people going, "Oh, look, how can the sun be 50 billion miles away when it's in front of this?" And it's just an optical illusion of, because it's brighter than the subject that it's obscuring, or it's that's obscured. It optically looks like it's in front of it when it's not. And again, limitations of the reality we live in, limitations of our perception, limitations of however it's projected to us, makes it look and feel like something it's not, and it confuses people, and they go, "Fucking hell." Again, this one, moon high up in the sky. This is the same day when it was big on the horizon as I was coming home. But as you can see, compared to the house on our street, it's actually pretty tiny in the sky. But an hour or two before that, as I was coming home with no camera, it was massive on the horizon. Because I think of our optical illusions like that. Looks like it's in front of those wires because it's so bright, it's much brighter than the wires. Clearly it's not, because it would have been on the street, and it's not. So optical illusions are everywhere in photography, and I've used these as examples because they're probably the easiest ones to come across and to spot. That's just a double exposure that I did to compare the sun and the moon in terms of size. But I mean, I love taking pictures of the moon because it is a fascinating thing. There are all sorts of theories about how I don't believe much of the science about how it came to be. The whack and then the double whack theory, that's bollocks. Personally, I think the Africans are right. It's more likely that it was towed into place than it was always there from the double whack. And again now, so you can see the blood moon in the background with the houses in the foreground, but at this stage it's nowhere near as massive as it was when it was lower on the horizon. Here it's probably up at about 20-25 degrees, so it's not low on the horizon. It looks like it's low because of the top of the house there, but that difference between 5 degrees and 25 degrees makes it appear to be tiny rather than massive. And again, I don't want to keep labouring the point, but my understanding of that is it's because optical illusions are everywhere, and the constraints of our reality mean we're limited to what we can see and how we can see it. And I think it makes absolute sense when you look at it like that illusions are combination of human limitation and reality limitation. If you look at this picture here, look, there's a picture of our back garden, some pegs on the line, and they look tiny. I mean, I'm stood in pretty much the same place taking that picture as I am that. All I've done is zoomed in on the lens. Maybe might have repositioned myself a little bit, but there, they look tiny and look like they're running away. But a slight reposition of myself and a zoom with the lens, and it's a different picture thing altogether. And everything we perceive is optically illusory. I mean, humans don't tend to see converging lines and don't seem to perceive the perspective we're looking at things from. Normally, we're used to seeing it, but when you put a camera lens on it, the way a lens works, it becomes pretty obvious to us. That picture, when you stood looking at it, doesn't quite look like that to human eye. So, again, limitations. Adding in more limitations or expansions of a camera, we end up with a close approximation as to what we actually saw, particularly if we're not using things like tilt shift technology to straighten things up. You know, if you're looking at a building and the building's either falling away or coming towards you, tilt shift lens it, correct the parameters and make it look like it looks to the human eye. Quite often it makes the pictures not as sexy or as interesting then, but that's kind of what you have to do to get around that. But perception, understanding, camera limitations, camera expansions will exacerbate most optical illusions you see. And it's a frustration for me in photography, because quite often I just want to show what I've bloody seen, and you can't always do that. So it's difficult. I understand it's difficult for people who aren't into this shit to wrap their heads around about how living in a simulation could have any effect on photography, because we just live in it, we just use it, we just photograph things because we're just used to living like that, aren't we? We are, but when you stop and pay attention to it, you don't have to start blowing your mind a bit and making sense, and helps you to make some sense. And if you just look around in life, I mean, there are optical illusions everywhere. You know, things like this one on the screen, for example. If you follow the dots blinking around the screen, the background of them looks grey, but if you stare at the dot in the middle, suddenly it goes green. I mean, perception, limitation, it's insane, is what it is. And there's lots of other kind of ways. I mean, I can remember that one doing the rounds of the internet, the black dress or gold dress or whatever it was, which is bullshit. But just have a look at some optical illusions and see how your brain, mind, whatever it is, interprets what you're seeing, and you quickly see the limitations of it. I mean, one of my favourite ones, I did this as part of my master's degree. It's a similar thing here. If we stare at that picture there that's on screen now, if you stare right in the centre at the dot, stare at it for a good 20 or 30 seconds, and then try not to blink if you can help it, but it don't matter if you do. Stare at it for 20 or 30 seconds, and then once you've had a good stare at it, look away. Hopefully it's a white wall, or even just into thin air, look and blink really quickly, and you'll get a colour picture of it. You'll be able to see it as a picture. It's not there, is it? It's not there, but it's ingrained into your consciousness, your brain, your mind, whatever it is, your optical nerves to see it. And that's just some kind of effect of the simulation we're in and the limitations of it.